In year 2 under Del McGee, can those Georgia State Panthers hang with Lane Kiffin and those Ole Miss Rebels? It's a bonus edition and crossover episode of Locked On Sunbelt with Locked On Ole Miss.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a special edition of Locked On Sunbelt. We'll get to Stephen Willis with Locked On Ole Miss here in a minute. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. So it's a tall task for Georgia State in year 2 under Del McGee to open up the season against Lane Kiffin and what is, I'm not sure, a perennial playoff team, so to speak, but certainly probably could have been one last year, but probably kind of borderish this year if things go right. They will be. But obviously Georgia State in year number 2 just trying to, I don't want to say get off the mat, but look for improvement. All right, they had the number 1 recruiting class in the Sun Belt, but that's going to take time to mature. But now they have a whole year under their belt compared to starting during spring ball last year. Want to see if Georgia State can compete. We go over the players to know for both teams. Obviously, very highly touted quarterback going to play for Ole Miss, whereas Christian Veilleux is back for Georgia State. See if he can improve. And of course, you got Ted Hurst at wide receiver. Lots to talk about. We cross it over with our buddy Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss.
So apparently all of the running backs from Ole Miss are playing at Georgia State right now. I'm joined by David Schultz, and it's a funny situation because Enrique Davis, there was a fabricated quote about him that is making the rounds. Rashad Amos, a running back that was at Ole Miss last year. Jordan Simmons, who I think spent the spring at Ole Miss, all being coached by Enrique Davis. David, it's interesting that they're doing the fabrication game with Ole Miss being a 35-point favorite over Georgia State.
Yeah, who knows what's going on with all of that, right? I mean, this whole Georgia State thing, it really is a fascinating, the coach thing, right? Because Del McGee, he got the job. I don't know if you know all of this, Stephen, but he got the job after spring practice started last year. Sean Elliott, he decided he had enough of the head coaching stuff here in G5. His family never moved to Atlanta. He was going back and forth. He was commuting. Like he'd watch a high school football game on Friday night and come back for the Georgia State game on Saturday. And so he just went to coach tight ends in South Carolina, still making high 6 figures and just coaching tight ends and recruiting. And so Del McGee got this job last year after spring practice started. And so he had to start from scratch. All the coaches were taken. And so his head was spinning. Other than recruiting his own son, he really, who knows what was going on there. They came up with a huge win, although at the time we didn't think it was, right? They beat Vanderbilt. In a ball game, they were actually leading Vanderbilt for most of the ball game. Nobody thought it was that big of a deal at the time because it was Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt had yet to beat Alabama at the time. And then they had a bunch of one-score losses until they beat Texas State, I believe, in San Marcos last year. So that was surprising. We'll see what's going on this year. They're bringing Christian Veilleux back. You would think it looks like it's a Cajun name. It looks like it's French Canadian, but it's not. It's more pronounced American, although it's spelled like a Cajun name, but it's pronounced Veilleux. And they're going back with him. We'll see what they can do. They were competitive last year. We'll see if they're very competitive this year. It's tough, to go up against an Ole Miss. They're obviously breaking in a new quarterback for the first time in a minute. And so we're interested to see about that, but it's going to be tough to see how good Georgia State is going up against, a team that is, I don't know if they're playoff bound, but kind of,
they're fringe
top
playoff.
20-ish. Yeah, top 20-ish this season.
Yeah, it should be interesting. And you mentioned Del McGee. What type of team does Georgia State normally do? Are they a passing team? Are they a running team? What are the kind of the systems looking like at Georgia State?
Well, that's the thing. We don't know. It's they brought in Hugh Jackson last year as an analyst. He's now the offensive coordinator. When they did win last year, Christian Veilleux led the team in all of their 3 wins last season. So I think just like all of the Sun Belt teams, generally speaking, unlike a Clay Helton team for the most part, they're going to run the ball and play defense and pass it when they have to. I think that's the way they want to do it. I think even outside of, I guess, Ole Miss may be the exception to those rules, and maybe LSU this year. They want to throw it around. But the more successful teams are gonna pound that ball, control the clock, and play defense. A couple of years ago, Troy actually won the conference by flipping the field and playing defense. You just couldn't move the ball against them, and they knew if they scored 17 points, they were going to beat you. Georgia State's going to try and play a balanced offense and maybe hit a couple big plays. Ted Hurst he's the real deal, and it was a big deal that he came back. He's an over-the-top wide receiver. That's the one guy that, Ole Miss has to pay attention to because he's legit. And, we'll see if Christian Veilleux can hit him over the top a couple of times. He will demand a double team because he's that good. And it was a big deal that he did come back for his senior year.
Yeah, I describe this as an athlete game for Ole Miss. This is a game where you want your athletes in space with Georgia State athletes as much as humanly possible. Whenever I went over the keys the other day, you mentioned the wide receiver being a big deal, but Kewan Lacey, Deshaun Stribling, the wide receivers that Ole Miss have, they have a top 5 unit nationally. Can Georgia State match up?
I mean, probably not. I'm gonna guess not. See, that's interesting. You call it an athlete game. If I was Ole Miss, I would call this a fourth quarter game. I want to see I don't want to see any of my starters playing in that fourth quarter. In fact, if I was Ole Miss, I would want to see my starters play. I always like my starters to come out of the locker room and get that one possession after I make the adjustments and see if they make the adjustments. Plus, I want to see them how they respond coming out of halftime. I don't care what the score is. We need to come out ready after halftime and get that one possession in. That's what I would see. And I want to see if Georgia State can compete, early on, right? Because let's be honest, Ole Miss is going to overlook them, right? It's tough to want to overlook an opponent first game because everybody is so anxious to play. But let's see if Georgia State can hang with them. And like you said, Ole Miss is going to out-athlete them, eventually. But can Georgia State stay with them, or is this 21-0, 8 minutes into the ballgame? I want to see if Georgia State can stay with them for a little bit, and then maybe there is an attrition in the second half to where, we are seeing starters in the fourth quarter, and then it gets to be ugly later on. I presume this game's not going to be close, but I do think that Georgia State could be improved in the Sun Belt and kind of be close to that bowl eligibility. You know this, especially with Lane Kiffin. People conflate those good recruiting classes with play on the field, but that takes a couple of years. Del McGee had the number 1 recruiting class in the Sun Belt for 2025. Well, those are all 18-year-old kids. And so they're playing. I mean, we got 7-year college players going. You got 25-year-old men playing college football this year. So that's not really fair. So it's going to take a couple of years for these guys to mature. But Georgia State's heading in the right direction. Them and ODU are kind of the sleeping giants. If they ever get it going in the right direction, you only need a couple of players to stay home in the Atlanta area, not to go to the Clemsons or the South Carolinas or the Georgias. And you can turn things around very quickly. Georgia State's usually used to be a bowl team on a regular basis. They haven't really contended for the Sun Belt. But I like the direction they're going in. I would look for them to compete for a Sun Belt division title in 26, but kind of tough to do that in year 2. But I look for them to be a little bit better.
So when we come back, we will talk to David about the players to watch for Georgia State. I will give a couple of players that I'll be watching in this game, and we'll discuss what is the way that Georgia State wins the game, what is the way that Ole Miss wins the game, coming up a little bit later. So stick around for that.
Let's take a time out. We'll come back and discuss the ways Ole Miss is going to win the game and how possibly can Georgia State win this football game. We'll do that right after I tell you about Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, and the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Remember, I did this a few weeks back. The Reds and the Brewers, last-minute day of game. Took my nephew, the Sammo, 13th row, $100, 2 tickets. In fact, less than $100. And we had a great time. And we saw the Reds snap the Brewers' 14-game winning streak. We had a fantastic time, all thanks to Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt. We'll get back to our crossover edition with Stephen Willis here in a minute. Do want to ask you to fill out a survey if you want a chance to win a Amazon gift card. You're welcome to do that. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockdownpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockdownpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt. Let's continue our crossover edition with Locked On Ole Miss's Stephen Willis. How does Ole Miss win this football game, and how does Georgia State pull off the massive upset?
All right, we are back in Thunderdome. David Schultz from Locked On Sunbelt in the house talking Georgia State Panthers with me, talking about the Ole Miss Rebels. And listen, in this game, everybody's going to be watching Austin Simmons because that's going to be a big deal. Everybody, the hype around this guy, this is the most hyped quarterback that has played at Ole Miss coming into a debut since Eli Manning. It is absolutely off the charts right now about this guy. So everybody will be watching him. But I think sneakily, and I mentioned this on the squad show, the SEC squad show the other night, I think Kewan Lacey, the running back, he provides something that they have not had in a couple of years at the running back position, that being a home run hitter. That is absolutely massive. And I want to see what the connection is between Austin Simmons and Caden Lee. If those two get together, it's ball game.
Didn't Shea Patterson go to Ole Miss?
He did, but his debut was not as anticipated as this.
Really? Because that's when I first got to Louisiana, and this guy was as highly as recruited as anybody.
Yeah. Coming out of high school, as far as a signing goes, yes, he was highly anticipated.
Okay. All right.
But as a starter debut, after Austin Simmons against Georgia last year let him down for the touchdown for the ending up beating of Georgia, everybody just really inflated on this quarterback. And he's really, really good. I mean, he has all the tools that you would ever want. He's a 4.5 guy. He's a left-hander. Has one of the strongest arms I've ever seen, and he's 6'5" tall. So we'll see what it looks like whenever he's on the field, but he has all the tools available.
All right. So we'll see about that. Again, the guys we're looking for, you got to put pressure on Christian Veilleux, to slow him down. And Ted Hurst is the guy. And like you said, the Ole Miss running backs are now playing for Georgia State, and you're going to want to smother those guys, smother those guys up. Georgia State's going to try and play a balanced offense. I'm much more of I want to use the pass to open up the run. Everybody else is the other way. Although I think Lane Kiffin is kind of more use the pass to open up the run. Although I think he would tell you different recently. He kind of poo-poos that recently. Georgia State's going to try and be as balanced as possible, but that's going to be more difficult, if they fall behind. And at the same time, if you start falling behind, they just may stick to the game plan. And, when you're playing a team like Ole Miss, it's a good opportunity to see who can compete, who stays with it, who quits, what can we do? Where do we need to improve? A lot of times, you can find out what you're good at and what you're bad at. I'm a big throw to the tight end guy. That opens up the field. And so, we'll find out very quickly what Georgia State is good at and, where they need to improve. At the same time, sometimes it's such a mismatch. You can't see that. A couple of years ago, Arkansas State goes into Oklahoma and loses 73-0. I don't know if you're gleaming anything from that outside of trying to survive.
Yeah, just throwing the film away.
Yeah.
And the RPO that Ole Miss is so reliant on, all the RPO is the modern day college football triple option. And if you do not stop the fullback in the triple option, as we all know, you're done for. You're not going to stop anything. In the RPO, the first letter in RPO is run. That is why Lane Kiffin, in my opinion, is pushing back.
Right. Is Austin Simmons, is he going to do a lot of that running? Because did Jackson Dart do a lot of that on his own?
No, some of it was called, some of it was unscripted. But Jackson was a quarterback that loved contact. It was a weirdness that he was almost attracted to contact.
Yeah, but that was more him running after guys were not open, right?
But it was zone reads and things like that.
Oh,
he
okay.
Did. Right. Yeah. He was a 4.6, 4.7 guy. He actually tried to not slide for the New York Giants and got popped pretty good. And everybody's like, get down. Yeah. But Austin can run the ball. He's a 4.5 guy. He's somebody that can be pretty special running the football, but it's going to look different because he's such a good passer of the ball. They want him to hang around in the pocket and actually throw it instead of giving up on the play and trying to scramble out of the pocket.
Does that matter which handed he is? Does he run because he's left-handed? Does he run to the right or does he run to the left?
I don't know. Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal had a story just Wednesday talking about right-handed versus left-handed quarterbacks and how the science and the physics have to change a little bit.
It does.
And you probably need him to scramble left. I know they're going to set up the guy that was set up for Jackson Dart's blind side at left tackle is now playing right tackle. So I'm sure some things are actually going to change. There's a whole lot of stuff in this game that will be interested on that. It's going to be everything but the scoreboard, in my opinion, in this game. I think Ole Miss is going to win the game fairly easily, but there's so many little questions that you just want answers before Ole Miss goes on the road to Kentucky and plays at home at Arkansas. That's their next two games.
Well, SEC almost right off the bat. Yeah, so the ball tails differently, right? When it's a left-hander, which way does it tail? And, there's what, if it's a slant, it may not matter all that much. But if it's a deep throw, the wide receiver may have, a second or two to make that adjustment between a right-handed and a left-handed quarterback. And that takes a little bit of time to adjust. So, yeah, I'm always wondering about left-handed quarterbacks. There's a reason they're few and far between in the NFL.
Yeah, it really is. And I think in the summer this year, Lane Kiffin had all the receivers. The goal was 30,000 catches off the jugs machine in July.
There you go.
To basically compensate and everything that was going to happen. They wanted to overly catch the football in the offseason this year. So there is something to that. Now, in my opinion, the only way that Ole Miss loses this game is if they allow for Georgia State to get confident and make mistakes, to turn the ball over, going for it on fourth down, stuff like that. That is going to be that's the only way that I can see that Georgia State can win this game. I don't see a scenario that Georgia State walks into Vaught Hemingway Stadium and kind of overpours Mississippi.
Yeah, even as a Sun Belt guy, I don't either. Again, I'm looking for, if they can keep this competitive through the first, half would be huge, but first quarter, that would be tremendous. Yes, if it's the only thing that I would be nervous about, that I would be anxious about, although they are getting a night game, right? Lane has complained about that. This is a 7:45 game. I'm sure he would prefer it to be an SEC game, is if they sleepwalk through the beginning of the ball game because they've been waiting all day to get it. I guess it's 6:45. I'm looking at Eastern time. So 6:45 Central time game. If they sleepwalk through the beginning of the game and turn it over. that would be the only way I could see multiple turnovers, right? This is not going to be, if it's 1 or 2 turnovers, that's not going to be enough. Even if Georgia State gets a little bit of confidence, I would be shocked if Ole Miss, puts up less than, 40 points, right? Isn't the line like 38.5? So
yeah, I think it's down to 35 now.
Yeah, again, I'd be shocked.
That is a lot of points.
What's that?
That is a lot of points. I mean,
it is a lot of points, but there's no reason why this 35 is 45-10. That's not outrageous. And again, I would presume, we're not going to see the starters in the fourth quarter. If you're either team, for that fact of the matter, right? Georgia State wants to see what they have on their bench as well, although they'll be traveling and not have as many guys available as Ole Miss will be. But I'm looking for Georgia State to see if they can compete early on. They're going to be the ones who are more excited, right? Ole Miss is going to be looking towards SEC play, and they're going to be looking ahead as if the coaches haven't already tried to, I don't know how you break down tape of teams we haven't seen quite yet because everybody is new, especially those two teams, right? Zach Calzada is the quarterback for Kentucky. Is he 28? Mike, what's going on here? Zach Calzada?
Yeah.
Gee, how many schools has he played for? My God.
Yeah, 2-time SEC washout, Zach Calzada.
So they're going to be, obviously, that would be, for me, that's the main focus of Lane Kiffin, is to focus on this ball game because they have SEC foes coming up. So that would be my concern if I was Lane Kiffin, to be focused on a game where I am, 5 touchdown favorite. Whereas I want to see
State has a couple of
Georgia State to see if they can compete early on.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see exactly what can happen. I think Georgia State plays at the old Turner Field in Atlanta now.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah, they've kind of repurposed that into a football stadium since the Braves moved out. It actually looks interesting. It does.
It's a tough draw, right? Georgia Tech's in town. They got to compete with Georgia. It's a tough draw. They're trying to build something there. It's obviously, flat out too big of a stadium for a Sun Belt team. And so, it's a tough spot for them. They got to somehow start to win. And, if you can start to win and, you start to close the upper box, although between you and me, Steven, when I was growing up in Syracuse, New York, I loved sitting up in the end zone. That's I didn't know what the all-22 was back when I was, 14 years old watching Syracuse upset number 1 Nebraska, but you can see the entire field when you're sitting up in the end zone. So I don't mind seeing that, but if they can start to draw, you're sitting in Atlanta, so there's no reason why you can't draw, 20, 25,000 if you can win on a somewhat regular basis. And I think it's going to be another year or so, but I think Del McGee may be able to do that, but not until 26.
All right. When we come back, we will talk to David from Locked On Sunbelt about the final score prediction. We'll talk about that. And since I have Locked On Sunbelt in the house, we are going to talk about Southern Mississippi and Mississippi State a little bit as well. So stick around.
Let's take a time out. We'll come back and wrap up our conversation with Stephen Willis with our predictions on Ole Miss and Georgia State. We'll do that after I tell you about Upside. Hey, Sunbelt fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with a free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Offer varies by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. Let's continue our crossover edition with Stephen Willis from Lockdown Ole Miss and give you our game predictions for Ole Miss and Georgia State.
All right, welcome back to the crossover edition of Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Sun Belt. We're talking about Ole Miss and Georgia State. We're going to get to Southern Miss and Mississippi State a little bit later on, but listen, this is a game that I think Ole Miss is going to win fairly easily. I think the starters are going to play longer than you expect them to because SEC play is next week, and there have been injuries at tight end on the offensive line that came back recently. So continuity kind of plays into this. So they're going to play a little bit on the field. Kind of bad luck for the Panthers. Listen, in this game, I think Ole Miss is going to roll. It's not going to be a 70-point game like Ole Miss did against Furman a year ago. I'm thinking 48-14. And they're just going to close it down and get ready for the Kentucky Wildcats because there's a little bit of revenge on the minds of people in that game.
Well, if you're telling me they're playing longer, so you're telling me you think they're going to play into the fourth quarter?
Yeah, probably.
All right. Well, then, yeah. So I if they can score, if Georgia State can put up 17 points, I'd be impressed. So I'm going to go 52-17. Again, I'm looking for Georgia State to keep it close to begin with. I think they're going to be the more excited ones, although it is a night game in the Grove. Ole Miss is going to be waiting all day long. I'm sure the fans will be all nicely lathered up, and we'll see. We'll see if Georgia State can come out and get a drive down there. I'm sure, usually first possessions are always, at least defensively, kind of vanilla because you don't have a real idea of what they're going to do, but then you make the adjustments. We sort of saw that last week with Kansas and Fresno State. Fresno State had a nice first drive and then did nothing the rest of the ball game. So, we'll see. Again, I'm looking for Georgia State to compete early on, and then, it's just a different kind of level of play with Ole Miss, kind of, playoff-ish type of team this year, and Georgia State's still, I think, on an upward trajectory, and we'll see if they can get to the close to 6 wins and maybe 5 wins this year. They got a tough schedule, including Ole Miss, but I look for them to be, more competitive and contend in the Sun Belt in 2026.
All right, so let's change over to the Mississippi State Southern Miss game. Having the Locked On Sun Belt guy in the studio, I have questions because this game is weird because you have the Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year preseason who was at Marshall, like 30 players from the conference champion transferred from Marshall to Southern Mississippi.
Right.
Listen, Mississippi State has better players because they are Power 5, but Southern Miss has a nice nucleus of players that know how to win, and they have done it before. But I worry that this reminds me of like when Ed Orgeron left Ole Miss, and there was a little bit of a wait before it clicked in, where they're going to struggle in September, but in October and November, they're going to be really good.
Well, it could. All right. So not only do they have the preseason Offensive Player in the Year, Braylon Braxton, but he won the Sun Belt Championship last year. For Marshall. He was the quarterback that came on about midway during the year and led them to a championship with Charles Huff, who came over from Marshall. Believe you me, my numbers went through the roof when that happened. All right. Thank you, Charles Huff. They brought over Josh Moten, cornerback, also there. All right. So a lot of the guys who did transfer in, they were on the 2 deep. A lot of the championship guys, they either transferred or graduated or moved on. All right. So a lot of the guys who played outside of the 2 that I mentioned have moved on. But nonetheless, the guys who did transfer, if they did stay, they probably would have played. So these were the guys coming up. This is a big ball game. If this was Southern Miss at Mississippi State, I wouldn't even think twice about it. This is an 11 a.m. Central Time game. It is at the Rock. It is in Hattiesburg. Stephen, it is huge. Make no mistake about it. This is the biggest ball game in the history of college football that has 2 teams that combined for a grand total of 3 wins the previous year. All right. Southern Miss had 1. Mississippi State had 2. And I believe one of those wins for Jeff Lebby was against a FCS squad. All right. You talk about must wins. This is a must win for Jeff Lebby. All right. Do I think he's going to get fired if they lose? No. But he's already kind of, the seat's always warm when you're the head coach of Mississippi State. It's going to get real hot before Labor Day if he loses this. Now, because, like you said, it may take a little bit, and I may have played it up with some of the players who were not there, like Michael Green, who was, the defensive, actually, he was the Sun Belt Player of the Year, led the nation in sacks. He is not there for Southern Miss.
Jaden Yates is at Ole Miss.
Yeah. Don't be surprised if Southern Miss pulls off this upset. All right. They are the line has gone from everywhere. I think it opened up at 14. It got down to 11.5. It's 12.5. Again, you want to see somebody on the hot seat before Labor Day. Watch this. And I can contend, Stephen, there's a reason why Kewan Lacey is the co-defensive coordinator at Alabama, because coming off on a 10-win season, he did not get a sniff, and he is Mississippi through and through. He did not get a sniff at that Mississippi State job, and Jeff Lebby got it because he was coming from a Power 4 coordinator position, didn't have an ounce of head coaching experience, whereas Kewan Lacey had a little bit of success of head coaching experience, but he decided, I can't get a head coaching job at the Power 4 level from the G5 level, so I got to go back to the G5 level and be a coordinator. So there's a whole thing with that, but I do think Southern Miss has got to, compared to the game we've been talking about, I think Southern Miss has a legit shot at pulling off what obviously is a two-touchdown underdog at home. They have a legit shot at winning this football game. I know Mississippi State's quarterback actually played pretty well last year, got hurt. I know that. His statistically was pretty good, but, Jeff Lebby's in year 2, so you presume they'll be better. Don't be surprised if Southern Miss pulls this one off.
All right, what do you got going on at Locked On Sunbelt, and what do people need to do, and what do they need to look for this weekend? How are you handling that?
Well, I mean, we're going to do a preview for Thursday's episode. We got some early ball games. App State is playing Charlotte for Friday, so we'll preview that one. ULM is kicking things off with a Thursday ball game, but we got some huge ball games coming up. Like you said, we've been talking about Ole Miss and Georgia State. Georgia Southern is going out to Fresno State. That's a great opportunity. And then Clay Helton is going back to Southern Cal. So that's a great opportunity too. Georgia Southern is actually spending like 10 days out west because no reason to come home, I guess, outside of school. But they're going to Fresno State, and then they're going to train at the Cowboys facility and stay out there before they play Southern Cal. Cajuns are opening up a new stadium. We'll find out who the JMU quarterback is. There's a lot to talk about. Texas State just named Brad Jackson. I think the redshirt sophomore is their quarterback. It should be a pretty good season for the Sun Belt. And, there are some teams. The Cajuns got a couple of votes. JMU got a vote or two. Could the Sun Belt, make the playoff? That's the big deal. JMU's coming to me in a couple of weeks. They're going to play Louisville. Cajuns got Missouri. These are good teams. They are not necessarily the top of the heap in their respective conferences. Could they go on the road and get some wins and all of a sudden, be ranked? And you know how the rankings work, Stephen. These other conferences, they all beat up each other up, and all of a sudden a Sun Belt team starts reeling off a handful of wins. And, a 24th ranked Louisiana Raging Cajuns is all of a sudden 8-0, and all of a sudden they're 13th in the nation because everybody else is beating everybody else up. So really looking forward to it. It should be great. We just surpassed, I know I'm not Ole Miss, but we just surpassed the 2,500 subscribers mark. So we had a great summer. La Tech is in, Texas State is out. Coastal Carolina played LSU for the national championship. So that helped out. As you know, LSU fans find you wherever you are. So they found me, and we had some fun with that. So we had a great offseason and really looking forward to this. You can find me on Twitter, SchultzyCast, and of course on YouTube, Locked On Sunbelt.
All right. David Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you later, buddy.
Hey, Stephen, always thrilled to be on with you, and so thrilled that you are healthy and up and going. You guys, you do a fantastic job. I just look to, do what you do and follow in your coattails, and really thrilled how healthy you are, and you are an inspiration to all of us. So whenever I'm down and wondering what's going on, and if things are going okay, I think about you and what you've been through, and you always keep a positive attitude and taking us for a walk and everything like that. So I appreciate what you do, and congratulations to you and your health.
All right, man. I appreciate it so much. Thank you very much for the kind words. And hopefully we'll have some good Sun Belt games this weekend, but not in Oxford, Mississippi.
See if they can keep it close early.
Yes. Take care, man.
Thank you, sir.